Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is the first sharing at Buddhist Society Facebook Live for me during the time when Dr. Punya Wong is taking a break. So I managed to sneak in. So I'm now doing the sharing. This is my first time at Buddhist this year. The topic, Samavayama, harmonious exercises. Samavayama is the sixth in the eightfold way. So of the eightfold way, this is number 6, the beginning of the bhavana, the meditation part. So let me just put you on, Let me just put you on this link. Right, can you, the link is not showing. Okay. Can you download this if you want? tiny.cc/samavayama, one word. And this is all the PowerPoint slides that I'm going to be sharing. Right? So you can do that right away. So let us all begin. Samavayama, normally translated as right effort. And the purpose of this practice of right effort is to guard the mind from unwholesome influences, both external as well as internal. Well, there are both external and internal. External are things happening in our environment, what other people are doing, what other people are saying to us, and what we can see around us. And internal is actually our memory and imagination arising, disturbing us, right? So Samavayama is the right effort to help us guard the mind from these unwholesome influences. Okay, now we have to deal with the problem of existence because we are all around here. We are all literally existing in this samsaric world. So we experience all kinds of difficulties and dissatisfactoriness and problems in life and whatever. And when we experience all this, this is what we call dukkha. Dukkha does not mean you have this great big suffering. It could be simple little thing like you are just feeling anxious, you're feeling unhappy with something. So we experience all this dissatisfactoriness. And then we react. That reaction is tanha, commonly translated as craving. But the real meaning of tanha is emotional reaction. The word tanha is often linked to the Pali meaning of thirst. The thirst is the thirst to react, the thirst for whatever it is. You know, if it is something pleasant, you thirst for wanting it. If it is something unpleasant, you thirst for wanting to get rid of it. So it's emotional reaction. So we react emotionally to what is happening and also to our thinking, our memory, imagination, and all kinds of thoughts arising, disturbing us. That is one of the big problems. And we also carry certain kinds of thinking about ourselves. We think of ourselves. We think of our situations, our circumstances, our friends, relatives, our job, whatever. Or we think back to the past. We think to the future. We think of the present, all this. The mind wanders around. So all this is really existential thinking. And this is really part of what is called moha, the delusion of a self-centered existence. Lobha, dosa, and moha. Lobha is the lust and greed for something pleasant, and dosa is the anger and hatred towards something that is unpleasant, and moha is this delusion of self-centered existence, which is constantly going on in us until we become enlightened. So such thinking, all this existential thinking arises depending on the way our mind was influenced by our experiences. Now here, the mind is also influenced by a number of factors besides experiences. It could also be influenced by our genetic inheritance from our parents. It can also be our past lives karma brought forward, affecting us in some ways. I'm not going to talk about those. I will talk about those that are within our control. That means our experiences, direct experiences, as well as the way we are thinking. These are within our control. We can control how we respond to our experiences. We can control what we do with thoughts arising. Right? All these other things beyond our control, we're not going to talk about that. So this is really the problem because of influences from our past experiences. And these influences are pollutants, contaminations of the mind that arise to affect our thinking and our decision making, and this prevent us from feeling peaceful, happy, right? So it really brings a lot of dissatisfactoriness, dukkha, and then we react with tanha. Right? So these contaminants, pollutants enter the mind and they stay there somehow. Especially if you reflect upon it, the moment you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something unpleasant or whatever, you think about it, then it gets into your memory, and they stay there. Sometimes they keep coming up. Sometimes they stay there for a long time before they pop up. This is what the Buddha calls asavas, defilements. Now, there's a very important thing we have to understand about the term asava. You will notice in some books and maybe some other speakers may be saying that the word asava means outflow of reactions or outflow of behavior. The real meaning of asava is not outflow. It is actually inflow of influences, influx of influences causing the mind to be contaminated. The outflow of reaction, the outflow of behavior is only a symptom of the root cause, which is the contamination of the mind. So what we're really going to deal with today is how it brings us suffering and causes us to react to things happening and to the way we are thinking. What can we do about it? So that will be the focus of today's sharing. So let's take a quick look at the meaning of the word asava as explained by Bhante Punanji.
Now even the word asava is wrongly translated. The asava means, it starts with the root of that word is sru, is sru. Now sru means a sound that indicates the flowing. Now if water is flowing, we say, oh, it's flowing, suru, 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 suru. That is flowing. You see? So sru is to flow. Now, in the Pali language, we say going is called gacchati. Gacchati is going. Coming is called agacchati. That prefix a is coming. Agacchati means coming. Gacchati means going. So you see, in a similar way, the sru is to flow. Sru is to flow back, coming. So there is a flowing out and the flowing in. So asava really means flowing in from outside, coming in. Asava. But today the commentators, they explain the sru as something flowing out.
Just also, you have just now very clearly explained the word asava, meaning the inflowing of disturbances that influence us. So it's an influence. I just want to highlight there are some books which translate asava as the outflow of reaction, which actually is the opposite of the meaning of asava. You know, asava is actually the inflow of disturbances that cause us to be influenced by it, right?
That's why I use the word influence.
Yeah, influence.
Influence.
Yeah, because of inflow. But some teachers have said that it is an outflow of reaction. That is not correct, Bhante. Yeah.
So it is the influence, right? So asava is really the influence that pollute the mind. Moving on, basically asava is commonly translated as defilements. In some sutras, you will hear them say it is taints, T-A-I-N-T-S. Well, defilement, taints, or whatever, it is all pollutions of the mind. Okay, so asava refers to external activities influencing, polluting the mind, and that influence remain in the memory somehow, right? And asava is sometimes mistranslated as outflow of reactions or behavior. Like the real meaning is inflow of contaminations. What are we really trying to correct or purify? Are we trying to correct behavior, or are we trying to correct contaminations of the mind? Bad behavior is merely the manifestation of reactions arising from an impure mind. When your mind is impure, having thoughts of lust and greed, anger and hatred, or delusion of self-centeredness, you will behave in unwholesome ways. If you try to correct behavior, it's just like correcting symptoms. You are not correcting the root cause. It's like you are sick. You have or someone is infected with coronavirus. Correcting behavior is equivalent to correcting symptoms. That means you're just trying to stop the cough, right? You're trying to stop the running nose, or the sneezing, or the fever, but you're not fixing the problem, which is the coronavirus that is contaminating your body, right? So really, behavior correction is only a temporary solution. It's symptomatic, and it's not a sustainable solution. The real sustainable solution is to purify the defilements, get rid of the defilements by uprooting these defilements that cause the trouble, right? So this is really what we are going to be talking about. And the Buddha has many sutras, or in many instances, explained many different ways of doing this. Of course, the one that I'm going to mention in a moment is this sutra, Madhupindaka Sutra, the Honey Ball Sutra, Majjhima Nikaya, Sutra number 18, where it is talking about 7 types of unconscious repressions, anusayam. These are really the contaminants that pop up now and again, disturbing our mind. The other sutra that directly relates to what I'm talking about is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 4, Sutra number 14, which is the Samvara Sutra, talking about restraint. 4 harmonious exercises to guard, protect the mind. This is the Samapadana, the 4 ways that we can deal with the mind being polluted, guarding the mind and clearing the mind. Then there's, of course, the very famous Majjhima Nikaya number 2, Sabhasava Sutra, talking about the defilements. There are 7 methods or 7 ways the Buddha explained you can abandon these influences. It's quite lengthy, so I will not be talking about that. And then Majjhima Nikaya 20, the Vittaka Santana Sutra, which I will talk about in 2 weeks' time. This is how to still the thoughts that are being disturbed. So 5 ways to calm the mind and abandon these unwholesome or bad thoughts. And of course, very importantly, Majjhima Nikaya 10, and also it's the Satipatthana Sutra, as well as the other one, the Mahasatipatthana Sutra. This is really this systematic introspection, or they call it mindfulness. 4 focuses of introspection to abandon disturbances. I will touch on this a little bit later on when Bhante Punnaji explains all this, right? And of course, there is also a whole chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya, Connected Discourses, number 49, talking about this Samapadana. So connected discourses on right strivings. So you can read all this up. So I hope these are good references for you to check up if you are interested to read the sutras yourself. Right? So let's get on with the first one, which is Majjhima Nikaya 18, Madhupindaka Sutra, the explanation of anusayam, the 7 types of unconscious repressions. Right? And then we will talk about the restraint, how we can guard the mind. Right? So in the Madhupindika Sutra, the Honey Bowl Sutra, the Buddha said that monks, in whatever way a person interprets his circumstances by classifying or labeling, it is in this way that past experiences begin to affect future behavior unconsciously. The key word here is also unconsciously. And of course, this past experiences is what I was referring to, the contaminations of the mind arising from your past experiences. So this unconscious repressed influence, this is the anusayam. So anusayam refers to unconscious repressions that arise. That means they are dormant and they pop up from time to time, disturbing you. And there are 7 of them. So the Buddha went on to say, there are these 7 unconscious repressions, anusayam, arising, influencing behavior, leading to disagreements and conflicts and all the troubles you have in the world. So the first one is about passion and greed arising unconsciously. I'm not going to go into detail about these 7. I'll just mention them first. I'll just mention them only. Ill will, hatred, views and beliefs. People hang on to their opinions. Vacillation and perplexity. This is often translated as skeptical doubt, vichikicha, but this is really confusion of the mind where you can't decide one thing or the other and you're confused about a number of choices. So vacillation and perplexity. Ego and conceit. So we have the sense of the self and the ego, and delusion of existence. And of course, avijja, which is unknowing or ignorance. These are the 7 anusayam arising unconsciously. We're not going to explore these in details because what is important is not understanding the detail of all these things, but rather what can we do about it? How can we solve this problem?
Anusaya really means, saya means sleeping. Anusaya means sleeping. That means, what is the meaning of sleeping? This is what Sigmund Freud called repression. That means people begin to forget things. And once it is forgotten, you don't even know that you are having certain things. You are not aware of it. And that kind of sleeping is what is called repression. And so, what is called psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud was to bring out these hidden, repressed things, bring it out and to become aware of it. What is unconscious is made conscious. So to make the unconscious conscious is what the Buddha, Sigmund Freud did, and that is what the Buddha did also, ultimately, to make the unconscious conscious. That unconsciousness is what is called avijja. And so, our mind is normally in an unconscious state. Most of the time, although we think we are conscious, most of the time we are acting unconsciously. This is the point. And this is why Sigmund Freud used the analogy of the iceberg. When the iceberg is kept in the water, it's like a piece of ice you put in the water, it begins to float. What is out of the water is only a small piece, the rest is inside the water. So in the same way, our mind, when we say we are conscious, we are only a small piece is conscious. The rest is all happening unconsciously.
Okay, only a small part of it is conscious. The rest is happening unconsciously, and because it is repressed. Basically, repressed doesn't mean you force it down. Repressed simply means it is sinking into a state of unconsciousness. You're not aware of it, but it pops up from time to time to disturb you. Right? So there are those 7. Right? So repression. The meaning of repression is, more importantly, what is mentioned down there, basically. A mental process by which distressing thoughts, memories, or impulses that may give rise to anxiety or are excluded from consciousness. That means that's sunk to the bottom, you are not aware of it. And it's left to operate in the unconscious. That means unconsciously it pops up from time to time. So it affects us past, present, and future. And in that sutra, the Buddha went on to say, when something is recognized, it is in this way that a person begins to behave in the present and in the future according to the way that he has categorized or interpreted what was perceived. So in other words, when we interpret our circumstances, we begin to behave in response to our interpretations. We're not really responding objectively. We're responding according to the way we are thinking about it, the way we interpret what's going on. Our interpretation of circumstances affected by these repressed memories, they arise when the conditions are right and they affect our behavior. So in a sutra, Anguttara Nikaya 3.34, the Nidana Sutra, the origin of behavior, the Buddha mentioned and used the metaphor of seeds, like seeds, good seeds that are buried underground. And slowly they will grow. They increase, they mature, and when the conditions are right, that means when you have rainwater, you have sun, they will rise up as a plant. So this is really anusayam, our thoughts popping up. When the conditions are right, they will pop up. Right? So the whole purpose is not to try to analyze these thoughts. The whole purpose is to try to solve the problem, because the problem is the problem of existence, the problem of suffering. So we should use our intelligence to try to find a solution to this problem. So this is a very popular quote by Bhante Punnaji, one of my favorite from him. It says, the purpose of human thinking is not to discover truth, but to solve problems.
The purpose of human thinking is not to discover truth, but to solve problems. And if a person suggests a solution to a problem, it can be tested. And if the problem is solved, it can be called the truth. And that is the only kind of truth which is a solution to a problem. So when the Buddha spoke of the Four Noble Truths, they are really a solution to a problem. So we can only talk about solution to problems and not about real absolute truths. There are no real absolute truths in the world. We are only talking about a solution to a problem, and a solution can always be tested. And if it works, it can be called a truth. This is how the Buddha spoke about truth. Yeah.
So we can only talk about solution to a problem and not about discovering truth. And the Eightfold Way is a solution. It's a solution to our suffering. And you can practice it for immediate gratification, immediate rectification of your suffering. But in the long term, if you are able to perfect your practice, then you can become enlightened and become an arahant. You will be completely free from suffering. Until then, life after life, we can still reduce the level of suffering by practicing the Buddha Dharma. So it's about solving the problem. And what is the problem then? In a nutshell, it is all these influences, the asavas, and then they go into our memory and go deep down as anusayam. And they pop up from time to time, disturbing us, and we experience suffering, dukkha. And then we begin to react, tanha. And this will create karma. If our reaction is unwholesome, it creates bad karma. And the solution or the practice in today's sharing, it is learn to guard your sensory perceptions and influences. So this first one, guarding the sensory perception and influences are guarding what you experience coming from outside. But there's also something coming from inside, guarding your memory and imaginations popping up. So you have to be aware what is arising in your memory and imagination. Then developing this introspective awareness by looking within. This is part of the whole process called bhavana. Some people translate that bhavana as meditation, but the real meaning of bhavana is cultivation and development. Cultivation is the practice. Development is the result you get from the practice. And finally, learn how to protect wholesome recollections, because you also have learned some good things, the Dharma. You have learned some useful things in life which help you. So you must also guard them and protect them from losing. You guard them so that you don't lose the good things that you have already learned. Right? So all this, you apply what is called yoniso manasikara. Yoniso manasikara is often translated as wise attention or proper attention. But unfortunately, the word wise or proper, it doesn't explain well enough. The real meaning, according to the way Bhante Punnaji likes to explain it, is deterministic thinking. Why does Bhante call Yoniso Manasikara deterministic thinking? Deterministic thinking is basically when you experience something, it's a very experiential process. When you experience something, be aware of what is arising and the root causes of the arising, how this problem arises. When you are aware, then you are able to find a solution to it. So it's really deterministic simply means something arises dependent on the presence of necessary conditions. So when necessary conditions come together, then they determine the arising of a certain outcome. So deterministic thinking is that to be able to understand your experience as you experience it. So one of the best thing to understand, the easiest way to understand is to look within, introspective awareness. How it affects your body, how it affects your feelings, how it affects your emotional states, how it affects your thinking, your thoughts. This is really the practice of satipatthana, which I will mention briefly later on about this. So this is really the solution, the practice, and this is really Samavayama. Samavayama has a number of different solutions, and this is really one of them, guarding your senses, right? So this is right effort, Samavayama. When we look at the Eightfold Way, this is really the solution to our suffering. First, we have this first part in yellow, and that is the right view and right thinking. With right view, you begin to study the Dharma, you understand the Dharma, and you cultivate an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. What is suffering? The causes of suffering, that the fact that suffering can be brought to an end, and the way leading to the ending of suffering. And when you understand that, you begin to feel confident that it makes sense and you want to do something. So this confidence and devotion is saddha. Saddha often translated as faith, but it's not faith. It's really confidence in the Dharma and devoted to wanting to do something about it. Wanting to do something about it is right intentions, harmonious orientation, samma sankappa. This is where you begin to apply your willpower, your energy to want to do something. You become motivated. Right? It is important to have this energetic willpower, the motivation to do something about it. So what can you do? The first practice, therefore, is the part in blue. What is translated as sila, the group that is right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Sila is really the purification of your behavior, your body, disciplining your behavior. And the first and most important practice, fundamental practice, is abiding by the 5 precepts. But of course, I'm not going to go much deeper than that, but that is really the sila part. Then comes the meditation part in green. And this is purification of your mind and eventually developing insight into the realities of life. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Right? So this is really the process of meditation. Begin by samatha, stilling the chitta, stilling the mind, and then vipassana, investigation of the sankharas, how things arise, how mental constructions happening, right? And the 3 major groups will be right effort, and that is harmonious exercises, Samavayama, and the practice is Chattari Samapadana, which is what we're talking about today. And then, of course, you practice Satipatthana, that is commonly called mindfulness, right? And finally, when you are ready, and not before that, when you are ready, when you have refined your practice of Satipatthana, you can then go on to practice this Satta Bojjhanga, which is the final stage that can help you gain insight into realities. So it is only this Samma Samadhi, the third part of this green box here, that is basically cultivating insight into realities when your mind is able to be stilled, samadhi, and in that stillness your mind begins to open up and see clearly what is happening. That is a state of they call equanimity, upekkha. Okay, so today we're just going to touch on these 4 harmonious exercises, Chattari Samapadana. So when we talk about harmonious exercises, the Samavayama, then one of the important practices is these 4 harmonious exercises. The first one is called samvara. Samvara basically is to prevent your external contaminants from entering. That means preventing unwholesome states from arising. That means preventing external influences coming in to disturb your mind and influence your mind, the unarisen ones. And that is samvara. They also call this restraint. Samvara generally is translated to mean restraint, right? So it's basically the practice of preventing and withdrawing your attention from that. I'll explain this in a moment. But in our past experiences with the anusayam, we have things in the memory, and the memory pop up from time to time. So when they start to pop up, we got to learn how to abandon them, let them go, eliminate them. This process is called pahana. So eliminate unwholesome states that have already arisen. They are in your memory. They can be repressed, or they can be in your recent memory, or they can be in your long-term memory. But whatever it is there. So it arises from time to time to disturb you. And then we need to cultivate good thoughts, wholesome thoughts. And this cultivation is called bhavana. I will go through each one in more detail in a moment, okay? So quickly, it is cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. That means now First, you prevent the external things from coming in. Secondly, all these internal unconscious arising, you let them go. And thirdly, now you begin to fill up with good thoughts, wholesome thoughts. This is bhavana. And finally, whatever you have done so far, protect them and maintain them. Don't lose the good results that you have accomplished. In a nutshell, these are the four practices, harmonious exercises. They call it 4 great strivings. So let's look through one by one. The first one is samvara, restraint, withdrawal. Prevent arising of unarisen unwholesome states by withdrawing your attention from sensory perception that cause emotional arousals. Right? So basically, it is preventing yourself from attaching or clinging on to your experience.
The reaction to the stimulus coming from the environment, the reaction pollutes the mind. The reaction pollutes the mind. So, to avoid the pollution, we are covering them. We have to cover the eye. Now, does it mean that we close our eyes, plug the ears, plug the nose, and shut the mouth? That is not the covering. Here the Buddha observes how the mind gets polluted. There are 3 conditions necessary for the pollution to take place. Now, if we take only the eye, we have to open the eye. If we open the eye, that pollution can take place. But that is not all. We have to open the eye, and something beautiful or ugly must come to be seen with the eye. If it is a beautiful thing, we will get attracted to it. If it is ugly, we will be repelled. That is the pollution. So there are, first the eye has to be opened, the other is something must come to that field of vision. But there is a third factor. We must begin to think about it. If we don't think about it, even if our eyes are open, or even if it comes to the field of vision, our mind won't get polluted. We cannot help keeping the eyes open, and we cannot avoid things coming to our vision. We can only avoid one thing, not thinking about what we see. And that is what we do. Not to think of what we see. We don't think, oh, it is very beautiful, or it is very ugly. We have to stop thinking. So even if we see something, we don't think about what we see. Even if we hear a sound, we don't think about what we hear. Even we smell something, we don't think about the smell. If we taste something, we don't think about the taste. If we touch something, we don't think about what we touch. That is the meaning of Samvara. Samvara, that is the covering. Like the boxer covers. That is the covering.
So Bhante was talking about the covering. Now I'll give you a simple example. It's really not about closing your eyes and your ears and whatever. Simple example, a young man. Let's use an example of a young man driving, and he arrives at a traffic light, and the traffic light turns red, so he stops at the traffic light right in the front there. While the engine is running and he stopped in front of the traffic light, then there is this young, voluptuous lady walking by, very thinly dressed and with very sexy body, walking past right in front of his car, bouncing. So if really Samvara is talking about withdrawing your attention from that. So this young man sees this sexy lady passing by. Now, if he reflects on it, thinks about it, oh, this lady is so sexy, then he's actually clinging on to what he is experiencing. He's actually attaching himself, thinking about what he is experiencing. This is reflecting on what you're experiencing. And when you do that, you're programming all that into your memory. Samvara refers to withdrawing your attention. So when the young man sees something like that, if the young man practices Samvara, what he would do is he just ignores looking at it, turn the attention to look at something else. Maybe look at the car next door, or look at the traffic light, or look at another part of the street. Don't get attracted by what you are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. That's really what Samvara really means, right? So the second one is Pahana, which is abandonment. So we'll take the young man example, for example. The young man practiced Samvara. But of course, when his car was stopped there, in the initial moment, this lady passed by, he had caught a glimpse of this sexy lady going by. A glimpse. He took his attention away, but that glimpse itself is enough to be kept in his short-term memory. And if he's not careful, that short-term memory become programmed. If he reflects on it, if he thinks about it, that short-term memory can become long-term memory. So in other words, even though he withdrew his attention from it, then as the light turns green and he drives away, he starts to think, oh, wow, just now that lady, so sexy. Now, if he reflects on it, then it is the memory. And this is where Pahana comes in. Abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Unwholesome states means he's caught a glimpse of that sexy lady. And therefore, it will arise. And when it arises, the correct practice in Pahana is to let go the memory. In other words, don't dwell upon it. Sometimes we have seen unwholesome things and it pops up. Just let it go. Don't dwell on it. Let go your memory. Let go your imaginations. Let go your expectations. And they cause emotional arousal. So learn to let go these unwholesome thoughts that keep popping up. Right? And these unwholesome thoughts can be short-term memory, long-term memory, or anusayam, something that has been dormant there for a long time, unconscious repressions that pop up. So Pahana is really learning to let go when memory arises. That means you have already experienced it. You have seen, the young man has already seen that sexy lady. So it is in his memory and it pops up from time to time without his choosing. And therefore, when that happens, if he's practicing Pahana, he will just let it go. Say, never mind. The best practice of Pahana, there's a Malay word for it. It's called tidapa. So when it arises, tidapa means never mind, So when it arises, never mind, let it go. That is it, tidapa. So that is the Malay translation of pahana is tidapa. Okay, right.
The other is prahana. Prahana means to throw away. Prahana. Han means to throw away. Prahana is to throw away hardly or in a very strong way, a strong throwing out. You see, it is like we keep a doorkeeper who will let only good things, good people to enter, bad people are thrown out. So we have a strong built doorkeeper so that if someone tries to enter, that person can throw. That means we have to throw out. That is prahana. Now what are the things we are going to throw out? Although we are guarding the senses in this way, we may be guarding the senses, but still the mind get polluted. How is that? Memories coming. It is not something that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. What we have seen before, maybe yesterday, or maybe last week, or maybe last month, or maybe even last year. Memories of the past come into our head, but the moment it comes, it has to be thrown out. That is the meaning of prahana. But it's not only something about the past, maybe something connected with the future comes into our mind. This is the problem, that your mind doesn't stay there. It goes away. So this is why they try to force the mind to stay in one place, and it becomes a big struggle. And that is what they call concentration. So this is the problem, that concentration. But the important thing here is not to start concentrating, but to learn to relax. To learn to relax the body. To relax is not to be doing something, but to stop doing things. So that relaxation is the way to throw out So you throw out not by struggling, but by relaxing. So you are learning to relax the body. This is why I didn't call it right effort. I called it the harmonious exercise. Harmonious means it brings harmony. Not conflict. So it's the opposite of conflict. And this is so your throwing out is, the Buddha uses an analogy about this throwing out. If there is a strong man kept in that as the doorkeeper, and a weak man comes there, wants to enter, that strong man doesn't have to strengthen himself to throw him out. It's like just moving the finger like that and thrown out. So so you don't have to make much effort. So it's like that. And it's a matter of relaxation and not a matter of tension. And that is the samvara. Samvara, pahana. So the samvara is to avoid thinking about what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And when memories come into the mind, or you remember something to be done in the future, they are all coming through memories and imagination. The future is really an imagination. And otherwise the future doesn't even exist. You are creating the future.
The future doesn't exist, we're creating it. So we have to be careful not to allow this imagination get out of control. And this imagination getting out of control is also referred to as mental proliferation, the mind running away with all kinds of crazy imaginations. Right? And the third one is really cultivation, bhavana, and cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. And there are quite a few forms of cultivations. The one that I'm talking about today is commonly called mindfulness, based on Satipatthana. This is introspective awareness and selective thinking, choosing our thoughts and being aware of what's going on inside. Right? So this is really helping us to cultivate a clean mind, not a mind polluted with unwholesome thoughts.
The third step is bhavana. Bhavana means cultivation. Now, the first two things, samvara and prahana, is a withdrawal of attention. Is the withdrawal of attention from what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and the memories and imagination of the future. So you are withdrawing your attention, and having withdrawn attention, you begin to focus your attention within, inside, not outside. So you withdraw your attention from outside and you are focusing your attention on what is going on inside you. But the important thing is when you look inside, what is it that you see? What you see when you look inside is Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana. So whatever happens to the body, you will be aware of that. If your leg is shaking, you will be aware of that. So you can look what is happening to the body. But you begin to realize that what you really see is a sensation. So what you are seeing is a sensation. You are feeling the body. So, but there is a mental image and you are also feeling. The feeling can come in the form of a neutral feeling or a painful feeling or a pleasant, comfortable feeling. And then you can become aware of your emotional state. Is your emotional state calm or is it agitated? You can become aware of the emotional state. And then you can also become aware of a thought that comes to your mind. It is a thought. So those are the four things that you become aware of. The body, how the body feels, the emotional state, whether calm or agitated, and the thought in the mind. Those are the four things: body, the feeling, the emotional state, and the thought. Becoming aware of that reduces the tension in your body and the emotional state becomes calm. That is the Satipatthana.
So that is really one of the cultivations, the cultivation of the Satipatthana. By bringing your attention inwards, you actually learn a lot about what's going on, how you are reacting to every experience. And you observe the body, the feelings, the emotional states, and your thinking. So that is really one of the cultivations. I'll mention a couple more later on. What is called bhavana, and this is the translation by Bhante Punnaji, he said it very simply put, it is by being conscious all the time that we can control our emotions. The constant practice of being conscious is what the Buddha called development or bhavana. So bhavana is really these cultivations and development, and therefore it is very important that you learn how to bring your attention inwards and become conscious about whatever is really going on. And the fourth step is basically the maintenance part, anurakana. This is to maintain, preserve wholesome states that have already arisen or developed by continuously maintaining attention and awareness of the prevention, the elimination, the cultivation every moment. This is really the constant practice of Satipatthana, or people call it mindfulness. The constant practice of being mindful continuously, day in and day out, 24/7. Satipatthana is not something you practice only during meditation. It is not something you practice only once in a while or once a day. It's really this continuous awareness of how the body is reacting to what is experienced, how you feel about it, your emotional states, and your thinking about it. Right? So this is really the maintenance part. There are also other types of cultivations and maintenance that can help you develop wholesome thoughts, so that now your mind is filled with good, wholesome thoughts. Right?
I said there are 4 things: Sangra, Pahana, Bhavana, Anurakkana. Anurakkana is to preserve or maintain that introspection throughout the day and night. So if you keep on looking within and you keep on maintaining that, then your mind gets gradually calmed down. And you are aware of every excitement because you are focused within. That calmness is what you are going to get. And that calmness is what gradually leads to the jhanas, which I call ecstasy. Ecstasy, the word ecstasy is a very important word. Ek means outside. Stasi means to stand. But outside here is really the inside. You are coming out from the outside into the inside. So you are getting inside. You are getting outside the outside. And that is how you get into the inside. Yeah, because you have been outside all the time. And now you are coming out of the outside into the inside.
Out of the outside.
Huh? And then from there on, you get insight in degrees that becomes the gradual reduction of experience. It's a gradual reduction of experience. So when we talk about the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, we are talking about a gradual reduction of experience.
Now, here are examples of some development of wholesome thoughts, and we call this anusati, basically. And this is found in Bante's meditation guide, level 1 of Arya Magga Bhavana meditation guide, where Bante basically suggested it is very important that in the early part of our training, learn how to meditate, we practice anusati to recollect the qualities of the Buddha and recollect the Dharma, recollect the Sangha, and also to examine our own inner thinking, feeling, bodily reactions, emotional states, and so on. all this brings us to be this deterministic thinking. By bringing the attention in, you are able to observe how your body is affected by what goes on and what you can do about it. And then Bhante went on to say that we begin by focusing on good thoughts, awareness of realities of life, for example, anicca, dukkha, and anatta. These are the realities of life. And dispassion towards all the trappings of the world. Everything here means the activity going on in the conventional world, the samsaric world. So cultivate this dispassion. That means don't cling on. Just let it go and abandon any excitement about it, right? And develop the compassion for all beings, metta and karuna. And then also cultivate this happiness through tranquility. That means this is really a tranquil happiness. This is not a sensual happiness. This is the happiness when you meditate and you're feeling calm and relaxed and feeling good. This is a very blissful form of happiness, not an excited form of happiness. Right? And then also cultivate this tranquility due to absence of imaginations and expectations. And then you develop insight into anatta, impersonality of experience. So these are all the various cultivations we can practice in order to develop our mind, fill it with good thoughts. Right? So basically, this is the cultivation and maintenance. Right? So the two actually go together. Bhavana and anurakana, they go together. Bhavana is something you cultivate. Anurakana is you continuously protect that cultivation, keep doing it, and don't give it up. Right? So finally, I will conclude. The conclusion of what we have covered so far is guard sensory perceptions and influences through samvara, restraint. Guard memory and imagination through pahana, that is abandonment. And develop introspective awareness, satipatthana, and preserve wholesome recollections by practicing and continuously practicing these good cultivations all day long if you can, and cultivate this yoniso manasikara, the deterministic thinking. Be aware. Give everything that arises in front of you. Be aware what is really happening, and give it the wise attention, and not get attracted to the features, attracted to attractiveness, or repelled by unattractiveness, and so on. Okay. So that ends my presentation. Then 2 weeks from now, I will then go into Vitakka Santana Sutra, calming unwholesome thoughts, based on the translation by Bhante Punnaji. So tune in again 2 weeks from now for another sharing with Mudita Buddhist Society. Two Fridays from now, that is 21st of May, 8:30 p.m. Then we will look into, we will be discussing this Majjhima Nikaya 20, Vitakka Santana Sutra, based on the translations by Bhante Punnaji, calming unwholesome thoughts. Right? So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Now, remember to download this link here. You can download the presentation file, tiny.cc/Samavayama. And I also give you the link to Bhante Punnaji's Arya Magga Bhavana Meditation Guide, level 1, so you can actually look through it. Okay, thank you very much for listening in. Now let's take a look at some questions that may be there. So there is one question from my friend in America, right? So Brother Adisa said, are these 4 steps practiced step by step or interchangeably? Okay, now, one of the things I noticed, sorry about bringing this up, Adisa, one of the things I noticed is that when we learn something, we don't try to box them and then say, this is one step, this is another step, this is another step. Don't box them. They are all overlapping. So in answer to your question, we're not going to practice this step by step. We're practicing these 4 things together at the same time. In other words, as you go through your day, and it is a 24/7 practice, as you go through the day and you see something that is very attractive, or you see something that is very repulsive, don't react to it. Take your attention away from it. Of course, if it is something happening where somebody is being hurt and you can do something about it, yes, go ahead and do it. You see someone being robbed and you can help the person who is being robbed, go ahead and help that person who is being affected by a very unwholesome event that happened. But other than that, if you see, things going on, people quarreling, just take your attention away. And if you happen to remember it after that, you recall the foul language that was used, or the bad things that was being done, if somebody got murdered or whatever, and it remembers, just let go the thought. Don't cling on to that thought. And at the same time, ask yourself, if something is happening and it's affecting you, you want to react, ask yourself, examine your body. How is your body reacting to what's happening? Because this is what happens. When something arouses your emotion, the first thing it does, this amygdala in our brain triggers a chain reaction and releases hormones all over the body. And the body changes. So you will realize that your heart is beating faster, your blood pressure is rising, and your muscles are getting all tensed up. You are already being aroused emotionally. So by examining the body, you realize that you are being aroused, and also observe how it affected you in terms of the unpleasant feelings or whatever, the feelings, and examine what kind of emotions are brought up and what is it making you think. So the four practices of four focuses of introspective attention, satipatthana. So all these various steps, samvara, pahana, bhavana, anurakana, they are not separate practices. Don't box them up. Look at them as all these are things that we constantly do because it's circumstantial. Samvara is when external influences. Pahana is your memory arising, right? Bhavana is your own conscious cultivations, and anurakana is maintaining it and maintain that practice throughout the day. So Adisa, brother Adisa, I hope that answers your question. Don't try to separate them into four different steps. Look at the four practices as things you have to do collectively, right? Of course, you do them depending on the circumstances or the context, but they are not separate steps, one step after another. They're not. They're really four things going on that you need to take care of,